Good evening all and welcome to episode 29 of the Huddy Hui. We're well and truly into the finals of Wellington Club Rugby. We're into some of the business end of First 15 Rugby here in Wellington. And speaking about First 15 Rugby, we'll talk about the quad tournament that was held down at Christ College in Christchurch this weekend. But joining us as always, Adam Julian. Adam, how are you doing?
I'm well, thanks Brad. Really looking forward to speaking to tonight's guest, who's one of the best players in Wellington Club Rugby. He won the Billy Wallace Best and Fairest Award. He's represented the Wellington Lions, and Manu Samoa, who competed so bravely against the Maori All Blacks on Saturday and have a massive match against Tonga this Saturday. 2 legs, Samoa-Tonga, winner goes to the World Cup.
Certainly does. And our guest tonight is Greg Foy, Poneke Club Rugby legend, works at St. Pat's Town for Director of Rugby. He's our guest tonight. Greg, many thanks for coming on the Huddy Hui tonight. You've represented Manu Samoa. Tell us about the importance of the game against Tonga this weekend, being Rugby World Cup qualifier.
I think the team will be looking to, that'll be the main focus for this mid-year campaign for the boys and the management. So the 2 Māori tests were a good hit out for them. But they'll definitely be looking to target this game as the main test match leading into this weekend.
Of course, Samoa having to re-qualify going up against Tonga. Tonga coming off that big loss to the All Blacks. But you never write off your fellow Pacific Island nation. They'll certainly turn up this weekend to give Manu Samoa a good fight.
Definitely. You know, you can't... The two neighbours, you definitely can't rule those 2 games out. So both teams get up for it. You know, in the past, I've been privileged to play in one of those test matches, and you know, two strong nations going against each other. You're definitely got to get a better show than they did in the previous weeks. Greg,
you were born in Apia, Samoa, and of course you played a test match for Manu Samoa. Tell us about playing for Manu Samoa and also your Samoan background and your heritage.
So, island born, did my primary school years on the islands. I was mainly raised from my grandma coming through in the primary years, and I used to follow her back and forth between Samoa and New Zealand. So when she'd come here, I'd follow her. And when she'd go back, I'd go back with her, and I'll be swapping between the 2. In my early junior years, but yeah, so that was primary school, and then I did intermediate and high school here in Auckland. So went to Peptoi, Waimonli, finished my primary school years on Waimonli Road in Otawa, and then I went on to Peptoi Intermediate and finished my high schooling years at Peptoi High School before I moved down in 2011, I think it was. Yeah. But playing for Samoa, I debuted in a test match with Fiji in Fiji. That was kind of unexpected, but it was definitely an honour to represent the country, because I played Samoa 20s, came through the age grades, played Samoa A after that, and then continued on to play for the Samoa Sevens in 2014 before eventually debuting for the 15 side in 2016. So that was kind of my pathway through getting to progressively making my way up the ranks. And our coach then was Alama Yeremia, Semo Setiti, Daryl Gibbs helped out for a little bit in the Samoan when we had our mid-year campaign. And Grant Buff from Counties. So, yeah. Oh, and Richard Watt from Poneke as well. You know.
What was the reason you transferred to Wellington after your schooling? And tell us about your rugby experience at Papatoetoe.
In Pep, I went in to play the Premiers early on, straight after high school. Dabbled a little bit in the Colts. So it was kind of back and forth between the 2 teams. Funny story is that during those school holidays, when I was still schooling, my sister lived down in Wellington. Her and her husband back then, before they moved to Melbourne, I used to come down on the school holidays and And if there was a spot on any of the teams, I'd jump for either the Colts or the senior ones back then while I was still schooling. That's kind of eventually how I ended up at Poneke when I made the move down after the 2011 World Trophy Championships in Georgia. And then it was kind of a natural transition that I ended up at Poneke when I first came down.
So Poneke, you mentioned before. Oh, sorry. Greg, you continue. Yep. Yeah.
Sorry, I initially came down for a month, just for a break, to actually attend the Sevens, the Wellington Sevens, the HSBC World Sevens, and then I ended up staying for never going back after that.
Would they let you back into Auckland after the Wellington Sevens?
Probably not after those 2 losses that we beat them in. Nah.
You mentioned the Poneke Rugby Club, Greg. Famous rugby club here in Wellington, out at Kilburnie Park. Who were some of the role models that helped you in your rugby career there at Poneke? Some of your memorable achievements, and tell us about the influence of John Jackson.
John Jackson was the first Premier coach when I first came down. At the time, him and Waddy, Grant Cedarway at the time as well. My memory is not that fresh, but there was a lot of big names involved at the time. So a few of the players you guys will know around the Travis Club legends, the Manu brothers, the Belfords, guys like Itu Tamura, who's our coach now, Ali Paynes, all those guys, who kept Poneke on a podium back in the days, were all still involved, and they played a big influence when I first came down to stay at the club, because they kind of just took me in and from day one just felt part of the club.
Tell us more about the Moanonu brothers, because they really are wonderful Wellington rugby identities, and of course one of them's no longer with us.
Yeah, 100%. Condolences to the Monano family of Lungi, but they're interesting. They're different. They're two totally different people. When they're on the field, they're totally different beasts, and when they're off it, they're the kindest people that you'll ever meet. At trainings as well, that's a different story. You can't do things half-assed with those guys around. You get put in your place pretty quick. But when you walk into that kind of environment, you either fold or you live up to the standard and that those guys have created and the culture within the team, and you can see a lot of players follow that lead with the leadership they did have back then. And I definitely as a young fella coming down from Auckland, I had bought into it real quick, because they're well respected around the club and the community back then, and still are as well. They're still heavily involved with the club. Whatoto and P still coach our Colts and help out, even though they say they're not going to be coaching anymore, and you see them down on Tuesday, Thursday trainings. So they're definitely part of the furniture and part of the reason why a lot of the kids and some of us are still around. And because you look to those kind of guys and you kind of think, wow, if they're still doing it, why shouldn't we keep going as well?
And what about the evolution of your own game? Have you always been a flank forward? And if so, what's changed about your play as a flank forward?
My first position, I was a fullback coming through school, and then moved to midfield. I played in all the backs positions in my high school years. Played 9, played 10, dabbled in, and then I ended up at midfield. It wasn't until my last year of high school that my coach at the time, Graham Phillips, he said we were looking for a 7, and I've always dabbled the idea of playing in the forwards because they do a lot more work than the backs do back then. So it was kind of like I wanted to get more involved in the game, so I naturally put my hand up and wanted to jump in the forwards. And I played one game in the forwards, and again never went back.
And there's something about Poneke forwards. They have a certain characteristic that might be a little bit different than the rest of the competition. Hard-nosed, street kids, all that type of thing. How do you live up to that?
Again, it goes back to the environment that I came back into. When Poneke was up there and playing top 4 championship rugby, you had guys like Masefo, was the incumbent 7 at the time. And so when I first came down, he was a starting 7, and as a young player, you kind of look to him. What does he do well? What separates him from other guys at the club and around other clubs? You kind of compare your strengths, weaknesses to what he has as well. And he wasn't the tallest player, so I kind of compared myself to him because he was ripped and massive, but he had a ground game that separated him from the rest, and I kind of related to that, and obviously worked to my strengths and learned of him. Because you had Ali Payne as well, who was the captain, and he played 6. Not a tall guy, but just hard workers. In the same year that I came down, Nganu Taufale started there as well. He initially was the first incumbent 7 that took after Masifau, when obviously me and him were fighting for the 7 spots at the time. So, and we're still playing currently. So yeah.
The last time I was at Poneke and Brad was there was when Nalu played his 100th. That was such a stirring occasion back in the clubhouse with the huckers and the presentation. Share with us a Nalu story. What makes him such a unique and durable guy?
He's just a good guy, 100% off the field, on the field. You expect nothing less when you go out to play with Ngalu. We have that relationship where we can look at each other without saying anything, and we know what needs to happen. It's less words, more action kind of thing. And when we come off the field, he's loved by everyone. He's the people's champ, if you want to call it that. He's real good with kids, and he's kind of like the glue that keeps everyone together. And he's the cool head when some of us get in the red zone when it gets a little bit frustrating at times. But you can always look to him if you ever short of inspiration.
You also got to represent Wellington. The Wellington Lions represent a few games there. Tell us about your Lions career, and tell us about what it is that you needed to go on to continue to get up to the higher levels in New Zealand rugby.
When I first came down, there was a pecking order of line of flankers, and did a bit of my research around who were the 7s back then, who were the guys in the lineups, what the pecking order was, and just did my time, did my research, watched certain Premier games, because I think my first year I was playing a little bit in the senior ones before I moved up to the Prems, and I'd watch all the Premier games, and I wouldn't even watch the whole game. I'd just be watching certain players and positions and see what they do well, see what their strengths and weaknesses are, and then I kind of tailored it to, compared it to myself with what I needed to work on, what I offered differently, and that's how I kind of, that was kind of my strategy anyway, of how if I was going to make a career out of this or make my way up, that was kind of my strategy to, moving forward, of knowing that, man, if I was number 9 on the list, how do I get to number 8? How do I get to number 7? And eventually, how do I make my way up that ladder?
And you made it all the way to the top of the ladder in club rugby, winning the Billy Wallace Award. Is that the highlight of your club career, or do you have other moments that really stand out?
Billy Wallace is, you could say it's the highlight, one of them, but it's not. I think just turning up for my club every weekend, being able to play with the guys that I'm playing with now currently, been the highlight, and to do it for this long. He's my 10th year at the club. We talk about it every year. Last year, we're talking about, this is going to be the last year before we hang the boots, and then when Ngalu says, I'll give it one more year, but okay, I'll give it one more year. Guys like Ben Huntley as well, double centurion, when those guys are like, we'll do one more year, then you kind of think, all right. They just follow lead, and it's kind of almost become the leadership of the Premier and the senior club at the time. And it's, I guess, someone told me a long time, what's the thing? I had a couple of words of a couple of people last year around playing and not playing, and short time play, long time sideline is the advice that I got.
And one of
Which
the
kind of made
reasons,
sense.
one of the things that sustained you, of course, is fitness. Now, I'm a little bit confused about fitness because you've got F45, you've got Instagram, you've got all sorts of different fitness programs and strategies. What is it that you do compared to all the others?
Lift weights.
What are they?
Lift weights, stack the bar, make the bar bend. Nah. I mean, weight training. You know, you have all the schools are fortunate now. You know, kids they have resources and people that are available to help them out with weight training. You know, back then, you know, all the bigger schools had academies. I went to a school which we didn't have an academy, and you kind of had to. We had a garage shed in at our school, which I knew I wasn't the biggest player at the time, and I just kept being told I had to hit weights. You need to get bigger. And then when I moved to 7, it was a different story as well. They're like, man, you're too small, you're too short. You know, the whole status quo that you have to be a certain size to play this. And I guess that was one of my main reasons or motivations to keep, you know, to keep playing and see how far I can go. And, you know, to initially my whole plan wasn't to become a professional player, to kind of just progressed on the work that I was doing. And I was kind of, at the time, I was like, oh, well, this is working out. And I guess it comes down to right time, right place, I guess.
And you're mentoring kids now at St. Pat's Town. You mentioned the Poneke experience and how that installed in you a real hard edge for competitiveness and standards. Can you be like that with contemporary kids? They've all got peanut allergies these days.
It takes a bit of balance. There's definitely, you know, there's no straightforward formula for how you approach things. You know, you kind of profile your students and the players that you get every year. And obviously, as they progress from year 9 to year 13, they develop personalities. You know, they move through these enthusiastic kids to kids you kind of now have to spoon feed, you know, certain things. But you get a different dynamic in the team every time. And as in my role, you kind of need to be able to identify that and adapt to the profile you get. Because one formula might work one year, you can't say that'll work the second year, you know, because you're going to get a whole new flock of kids come through. Year 13s leave, and you got the younger guys coming through who are not, you know. Let's compare the first 15 who we train 5-6 times a week, 3 mornings, 3 afternoons, all different trainings. We don't flog them every session, but it's all tailored to what we want them to how we want them to play. And some kids moving, you know, from under 15s, seconds, first year, first 15s, they kind of, it's a big shock for them, you know, to move from 2 trainings a week to the 5 or 6, the early mornings, the late afternoons, you know. And it's a big mindset shift for those guys. And it's kind of, from early on in pre-season, you're kind of going to get those kids on the buy-in real quick. Otherwise, you're going to get left behind. You know, some kids learn quicker than others. Some you got to hold their hand along the way and guide them. But that's the beauty of the job. You know, you mentor them. You wear your different hats at different times. Sometimes I have a coach hat on, facilitator, mentor, a friend sometimes. But it's all different, you know. We have different hats with different kids at different times. Sometimes they just need to be told what to do. Put the hard drill sergeant hat on if needs to, if order needs to be, you know, put in place. And sometimes you're going to just sit back and take the back seat and let them run it.
Pacific Island Rugby has a huge step next season. Of course, Moana Pacifica and a Fijian side in Super Rugby in 2022. It's been a long fight for Pacifica Rugby. It's going to be important for the growth of rugby with 2 Pacific Island teams in Super Rugby group.
It's definitely a starting point, you know, definitely moving forward. It's been in the works for the last few years, and it's important that, you know, we kind of keep building on that relationship. And I mean, in my opinion. I just hope it all works out and everyone. I guess you're always going to have the politics, but I mean, it's a starting point. It's happening. I'm just looking forward to how it pans out next year.
Is there any chance you might be offered to play for the Pacific Island team? Where are the players going to come from?
Locally, I guess. Now it opens up more doors. Whereas you got your 5 Super Rugby teams, another Moana Fijian team, if there is. It just creates more doors for more players to get involved and give them more opportunity and hopefully strengthen, obviously, our PI teams, Tonga, Fiji, Samoa, so that we don't have to go looking elsewhere for them or wait for our European or French players to be able to be released to come back and play.
And just looking at that test again, why will Samoa win? Where do you think they have a strength advantage over Tonga?
Samoa definitely have a good coaching crew. You got Andrew Goodman from Crusaders in Tasman. You got Seilala Makusua. You got Tom Coventry. So they're really experienced coaches. And you got a mix of experienced players who've been in the team for a while, which helps breed that culture over the years. And I think that's important in instilling the culture into the younger players coming through, the debutants, and that your time here is short and you got to make the most of it. And if you want to keep the blue jersey, you got to work, you got to buy in, you got to learn. And it's not it's not your destination. It's another platform for you to showcase talent. And hopefully the guys coming through now, it doesn't end there. And that they keep wanting to be hungry and to keep playing and to keep wanting to come back to play for the jersey.
Well, Greg, oh, geez, echo there. Oh, Greg, it's been great having you on the Huddy Hui tonight. Go well in round 1 of the Harding Cup against Parramatta Plomerton.
Appreciate it. Thanks for the invite. Yeah, I was looking forward to the end of the season now, to be honest. Not many games to go, and I think it would be nice to have the weekends back. But it's been a long season. I mean, long first round, and I think the way that the second round set out is it kind of actually works out the older you get anyway.
Well,
I appreciate
Greg,
you guys having me on anyway, guys. Adam
awesome, Greg.
Thank you.
Fantastic, Greg. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Oh, Adam Greg Foy, he's a legend of Wellington Club Rugby that year. He won the Billy Wallace medal. It was justified. He's an outstanding player. He's a good role model. And he's one of the best after-match speakers I have seen in my time covering rugby.
He's a very charismatic and capable guy, Greg Foy. He won the Billy Wallace Memorial Award convincingly in the year that he did. There was really no competition throughout the season. He was clearly the best player. And of course, he went on to captain Wellington. So that really says it all about his contribution to the game in the club scene. He's played a number of blinders over the years, too many to remember, really. And let's hope that he keeps the fitness and retains his place in the Premier game, because he really is one of the elite talents.
He certainly is. And of course, this week, Adam, was the annual quad tournament between Wanganui Collegiate, Wellington College, Cross College, and Nelson College. And today was the final of the quad. And you watched the game on Sideline.live while I was busy teaching. And by all accounts, it was an absolute thriller.
It's a good life when you can watch Sideline on a Thursday afternoon. There were 2 games. The consolation final, which involves the losers from Monday's exchange, and that was between Whanganui Collegiate and Wellington College, and unfortunately the local side was beaten 24-15. Wellington scored 2 nice tries to Sam Mio and to Puka Pahongo, but unfortunately Whanganui were too strong, and they've had a resurgence in recent times. Whanganui, they went 10 years without winning a single game at the quad, but there's an Englishman who's arrived as the coach. His name is Steve Simpson, and prior to his involvement in Whanganui, he was with Francis Douglas, and he produced names like Ricky Riccatelli, Duplessis Karifi, and a quartet of Barrett brothers. So he knows what he's doing. and Poneke have won 6 games in the Central North Island series this year, and they have a tidy team who accounted for a good Wellington College side by 24-15. And then the final was an absolute scream. Christ College, locally interested in, because they're coached by Ross Kennedy and Sam Chamberlain, who are stalwarts of Old Boys University, and they went ahead by 20-3. And their winger, Jack Belcher, scored 3 tries the same way, receiving the pass from his first 5'8", Jack Shearer. Christ really exposed a vulnerable left side of the Nelson defence, and they rampaged to a 20-3 lead. They also hit the post with a conversion attempt, were held up over the try line, and had another try denied for a forward pass. So that was the extent of their dominance, 20-3 at half-time. And suddenly the pendulum turned. The Nelson forwards got nasty and precise, and they scored 3 tries in 15 minutes, and the game was level. Christ scored again. 25-20 was the score. They missed another penalty, which would have put it beyond doubt. And then Nelson preserved the ball for an elongated passage of play. They took it from their own 22 to the Christ 22, and eventually all the way to the try line. And the winning score was made by the hooker, Dylan Irvine, or Irvine Intervention, as I'm now calling him. And there was a fantastic captain on display for Nelson College. His 3rd year in the first 15. He's a centre 3/4 by the name of Ollie Itch. So look out for him in the future. But the star of the game was the Nelson blindside flanker, and he is enormous, absolutely huge. Natani Bali Somosomo. He's a Fijian lad, and in the tradition of Lester Whaianuku, who's Tongan, but he's another one of those beauty Pacific Island players that they produce in the top of the South Island. And without exaggeration, Natani might have carried the ball 40 times in the game. He was just immense, and a big reason why Nelson came back to win the quad for the 27th time, 27, ironically, 25 against a very good Christ College side. That quadrangular tournament really was struggling for a while. Wellington College won at least a dozen in a row. Whanganui weren't competing, Christ weren't competing, but those sides have elevated the standard of their play, and it's a terrific tourney now.
Well, it certainly is. And speaking about teams that are winning trophies, OBU won the Swindell Shield last week on a tiebreaker, Adam. It came down to that game where they just narrowly beat Marist St. Pat's a few weeks ago. But OBU taking out the Swindell Shield, and now we have this new finals format.
That's it. And so essentially, my understanding of the format is that the top 4 sides get a second life, and the bottom 4 sides are playing for their future in the competition. So the matches this weekend are Old Boys University versus Huddy Boys Marist. That was very close in the first round.
It was,
the students
yeah,
winning that 23-20. Huddy Boys Marist, with the likes of Ben Power, Brandon Lawson, and a lot of experience, will sternly challenge Old Boys University, whose display on Saturday was outstanding against Tower after a shaky few weeks where they stumbled against Auries and were almost tipped over by Upper Hutt and Petone. Sam Reid, leading point scorer in the Swindell Shield this year. What a terrific season he's having. And Dominic Ropeti, that beautiful young lock forward, he's got a big future. So that'll be a great tussle and perhaps a narrow students' victory at home.
And of course, you're calling Northern United against Wainuiomata this Saturday on Te Puka o Te Ika, Adam. And that was a game in the first round where everyone thought probably Norths were going to win quite comfortably at half-time. But you never write off Wainuiomata, particularly at home. And they came back to win the game in the last minute at Wainuiomata.
And that's the reason I selected that game. Daniel Ferrani scored the winning try in that match. We were talking about old loose forwards. Greg Foy, he's got 15 years before he catches Daniel Ferrani. But spare a thought for Richard Squid Evans, the midget Petone winger, who was piggybacked over the sideline by Daniel Ferrani on Saturday in the game between Petone and Wainuiomata. He hung on to Ferrani's ankle. He got dragged like a bloke water skiing about 5 metres and somehow managed to slither up the back. That's why they call him Squid, and muscle Ferrani into touch, who was more irritated at the fact that this leech was attached to him and genuinely out-muscled by Richard Evans. So that was a very funny moment. Wainui Amata with Peter Umaga Jensen in the midfield can't be discounted. He's a formidable player. Jordan King at halfback is a steady hand. And, of course, Terry Time was in bustling form against Petone. So Norse won't find it easy, but there is a whisper that TJ Perenara will play second five this week. I understand Bruce Kauika-Peterson is back in town, so he might feature for Norse. And imagine if he's alongside Duplessis Karifi, turn up the Energizer batteries on that one.
Well, Northern United, they're getting some key personnel back at the right time of the season. And, of course, it's round 7 of the Wellington First 15 Premiership, and it's the top of the table clash this weekend, Adam. I'm calling that game on Sideline.live. Scots College versus St. Patrick's College, Silverstream at 2:30 p.m. at Scots. Of course, Scots last week, comfortable win over St. Pat's Town. They scored, wait for it, Adam, they scored 4 tries from line-out drives, 2 of them outside the 22. Impressive win over St. Pat's Town. Silverstream, of course, had that upset loss against Wellington College, but Silverstream always step up for this game.
Absolutely, they do. There's no love lost between these two schools. They've played 3 Premier 1 finals. Scots have won them all, but the margins have been 3 points twice and 5 points in 2019. Prior to the 2014 final, Silverstream had never lost to Scots, but Silverstream have the record for the most wins consecutively in Premier 1 with 28. And I like the matchup this year, 2 monstrous packs. I can't wait for the first collision between Mia Tima Schmidt and Toby Crosby. There's some serious protein in those 2 boys' diets. The Scots line out, Tima Schmidt, that's like throwing to Kevin Garnett, so they shouldn't lose a line out all season. That guy is absolutely enormous. And then, of course, the backs have some very interesting personalities. Tony and Emmanuel Solomona, very bruising for Silverstream. And Scott's very quick, pacey side with the likes of Eric Lawson featuring prominently. So this will be a cracking game. And over there in Strathmore, it'll be a big crowd too.
Well, it certainly will be, Adam. And next week's Huddy Hui. Well, we're not both from Wellington next week, Adam, but I won't be here in the studio, but I'll be broadcasting from a unique part of New Zealand. It was the first capital of New Zealand. It's called Russell. It used to be called Kororake, and I'll be broadcasting live from the Duke of Marlborough. What a fascinating part of the world, Adam.
Absolutely. Duke of Russell, I feel very jealous about that.
And that's the Huddy Hui for tonight. Ciao for now.